true tale from my granny. When I was a child, my grandmother told me a story about how she got a massive candy cane-shaped scar on her inner thigh. She would often tell me this story whenever I got hurt and needed a bit of cheering up. It happened in the year 1944 when she was just 16 years old. My grandmother had a daily routine of walking to school, but being an adventurous teenager, she would often take shortcuts by hopping fences. There was one particular fence that she had her eyes on, and if she could jump it, it would save her so much time. She tried many times to jump it, but she seemed to not be able to do it. She would have to hop the shorter fence on the left and walk all the way around the houses. One day, my grandmother was on her way home from school, and she was jumping fences like she usually did. As she jumped into the yard where she would have jumped the shorter fence, she noticed a man standing near it. The man was dressed in an old-fashioned suit, and my grandmother said that it was a pinstriped one with a black hat. At first, my grandmother was embarrassed because she thought that the man had caught her jumping fences. But when she looked closer, she realized that the man was only half of a man. He was solid at the top and faded out around his waist. She was scared, but she tried to stay calm and ran towards the tall fence to jump it. My grandmother ran as fast as she could toward the tall fence and jumped it. She was so scared that she didn't even notice that the fence had barbed wire on the top. And as she climbed over, it cut her inner thigh. When she finally made it home, she realized that her leg was covered in blood and her favorite skirt was ripped beyond repair. The scar from that incident stayed with my grandmother for the rest of her life, and it became a reminder to always be careful and be aware of your surroundings. Whenever she told me this story, I could see the scar on her inner thigh, and it always amazed me how something that happened so long ago could still be so vivid in her memory. My grandmother passed away many years ago, but I still think of her often and the stories that she told me. This story in particular has always stuck with me, and I retell it to others whenever I need a little bit of inspiration to be brave in the face of fear. Paranormal encounter with a strange goblin devil-like creature that other people with me also saw. Allow me to take you back to a distant time in my childhood when I was just a young curious kid. On that particular evening, as the night began to unfold, my dear mother tucked my brother and me into our cozy beds, bidding us good night. She then retired to her own room, though she remained awake for a while. The soft glow of light emanating from her slightly ajar bedroom spilled into the hallway, preventing the darkness from engulfing our surroundings entirely. Given the short and narrow nature of the hallway, it never truly became pitch black. Positioned right in front of my bed, the door to my room provided me with a clear view of the hallway. As I lay there, comfortably nestled between my covers, I found myself gazing intently into the well-lit corridor. It was during this silent observation that a sudden and inexplicable event unfolded before my very eyes. Out of the corner of my vision, a peculiar and enigmatic creature materialized, traversing the hallway in front of my door. Its appearance was nothing short of extraordinary, resembling a curious fusion of a goblin and a devil. My initial inclination was to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, a mere creation of my young mind. However, just 3 seconds later, my brother, whose room was adjacent to mine, broke the silence with a tremor in his voice. "Mom, is that you? Something just passed through the hallway." Startled by my brother's statement, our mother hurriedly emerged from her room, her face etched with a mixture of surprise and concern, realizing that something extraordinary had indeed occurred. She meticulously scoured every nook and cranny at the end of the hallway, which led solely to the bathroom. Yet, to our collective bewilderment, her search yielded no evidence of the creature's existence. Not a trace remained. It was as if the creature had vanished into thin air. No windows were left ajar to explain its sudden disappearance, leaving us dumbfounded and filled with an eerie sense of uncertainty. Attempting to provide a description of the creature, I estimate its height to have been somewhere between 60 and 70 centimeters, although my memory may serve me less than perfectly. I utilized the nearby light switch as a mental reference point to gauge its size. Devoid of any noticeable tail, horns, or wings, its body appeared emaciated, almost skeletal in nature. Furthermore, its entire form was shrouded in a deep shade of obsidian, which accentuated its mysterious aura. What struck me most about this extraordinary being was its unearthly silence and remarkable swiftness. In a mere blink of an eye, it traversed the hallway, leaving barely a whisper in its wake. The phenomenon was akin to witnessing something so incredibly fast that in its physical movement remained imperceptible to the naked eye. Instead, it appeared frozen in time, existing only for a fleeting moment before vanishing from our realm of perception. Since that bewildering encounter, I have neither laid eyes upon nor crossed paths with this otherworldly creature. Its whereabouts and ultimate fate remain a perplexing enigma, as if it dissolved into the very fabric of existence, defying the laws of reality. And so, my tale concludes, leaving us with a lingering sense of wonder and an unquenchable thirst for answers. The memory of that fateful night, forever etched in my mind, serves as a reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our everyday lives, waiting to be unraveled and understood. The clocks. Encounter? When I was younger, around elementary or middle school age, I used to spend weekends at my grandparents' house. It was a regular occurrence, nothing out of the ordinary. Whenever I stayed over, I slept in the guest room, which was a typical room with a double bed, a big wardrobe, and a small table in the corner with a TV on it. What made this room unique was the 2 long shelves filled with clocks. I remember counting around 20 clocks in total, ranging from old to new, cheap to expensive, and even alarm clocks. They all had their own distinctive ticking sound, which filled the room and lulled me to sleep every night. One particular night, however, everything changed. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling uneasy. At first I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong, but then I realized the ticking sound of the clocks had changed. They were no longer making the regular tick-tack sound. Instead, each clock would make a tick noise, and then the sound of a deep voice saying tack would follow. It was as if a man was standing in the room saying tack every time the clock was ticking. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the sound continued, and it only got louder and louder. I started to panic, feeling as though something was very wrong. I attempted to go back to sleep by covering my head with a pillow, but that didn't work. I could still hear the voice saying tack over and over again, getting louder and faster each time. In a moment of sheer terror, I made the decision to leave the room and run to my grandma's bedroom. As I approached the door, the sound grew louder and quicker, the voice now yelling tack with increasing intensity. I bolted out of the room and the sound immediately ceased. I didn't stop running until I reached my grandma's bed, where I told her everything that had just happened. We prayed together, and I ended up sleeping in her bed for the rest of the night. From that point on, I continued to spend weekends at my grandparents' house, but we always removed the clocks from the guest room at night. I never experienced anything like that again, but I have had other paranormal encounters since then, and interestingly, some of these have also been related to clocks, but none have been as frightening as that night in the guest room. What was that? Let me take you back to a memory from my younger days, a haunting encounter that continues to occupy my thoughts. even now. This peculiar incident unfolded when I was just a student, either in middle or elementary school, and its enigma has never ceased to intrigue me. It happened during a visit to a friend's house, an abode that could only be described as a mansion, at least when compared to my humble-sized dwelling. This extravagant residence boasted 2 floors, a glistening pool, and even a private forest, which seemed like a fantastical wonderland to my youthful eyes. On that fateful day, my friend and I were engaged in joyful play, relishing in the freedom of an afternoon unburdened by responsibilities. Laughter filled the air as we frolicked around the house, delighted in the various amusements that it had to offer. However, as the sun began its descent and the velvety night draped its cloak upon us, a strange sequence of events unfolded, etching itself into the deepest recesses of my memory. As darkness settled in, we found ourselves alone within the confines of the grand mansion. The house, now shrouded in shadows, took on an eerie aura that seemed to amplify the subtle creaks and whispers emanating from its walls. I can't recall the exact reason, but we gravitated towards a piano located on the first floor, its ebony and ivory keys beckoning us to explore their melodic potential. The only source of illumination was a solitary light directly above us, casting an ethereal glow that barely managed to pierce the encroaching gloom. From my perch at the piano, I peered into the expanse of the living room, catching glimpses of the dimly lit dining room table and the silver of the adjacent kitchen. The ceiling soared to remarkable heights, a testament to the mansion's grandeur. The house itself followed a unique L-shaped architecture, concealing the kitchen from our direct line of sight with a formidable wall and a mysterious corner that obscured our view. Focused on my musical endeavor, I immersed myself in the intricate dance of melodies, oblivious to this enigmatic revelation that awaited me. As my fingers danced upon the keys, skillfully navigating the symphonic sounds, an eerie sensation crept over me. It was then that my friend, seated right beside me, began tapping on my shoulder incessantly, an urgency palpable in his actions. His voice trembled with concern as he implored me to divert my gaze toward the ominous corner that had captured his attention. Lost in the pursuit of musical perfection, I chose to ignore his persistent nudges, dismissing them as distractions that threatened to derail my performance. Finally, as the notes resonated through the stillness, I relinquished my focus on the piano's keys, allowing my eyes to ascend and confront the mystery that had captivated my companion. What I witnessed in the harrowing moment defied all logical explanation. Peeking out from the lofty corner, just at the edge of my field of view, was a figure, a presence so indescribable that words fail to convey its true essence. It lacked a discernible countenance, engulfed entirely in a darkness so profound it seemed to consume all light around it. However, in the midst of this obsidian void, a peculiar anomaly stood out, an ethereal white ring that encircled the area with its face, or rather where its face should have been. Yet even more chilling than its inexplicable appearance were its grotesque extremities. Long, sinewy figures extended from its enigmatic form, ominously moving and contorting as it instinctively retreated into the shadows, vanishing from sight as soon as our gazes locked onto it. An icy shiver raced down my spine, sending tremors of fear coursing through every fiber of my being. In that moment, the reality of the situation bore down upon me, and the adrenaline-fueled instinct for self-preservation surged through my veins. Reacting swiftly, my friend instinctively bolted toward the safety of the upper floor, seeking refuge from the unknown entity that had materialized before us. However, curiosity mingled with trepidation within me, compelling me to investigate further. Ignoring the warnings that instinctively urged me to flee, I mustered the courage to venture into the dimly lit kitchen, determined to unravel the enigma that had seized hold of my senses. Each step I took reverberated with an eerie hush, heightening the atmosphere of surrealism that enveloped the mansion. As I cautiously explored the kitchen, my senses attuned to every sound and movement, a disconcerting realization washed over me. The absence of any tangible evidence. It was as if the entity, that unexplainable presence, had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace of its existence behind. The once familiar surroundings had transformed into a maze of uncertainty, where every shadow seemed to harbor secrets and every sound whispered of unseen forces at play. Questions tugged at the corners of my mind, demanding answers that remained frustratingly elusive. What was that phantom apparition that had momentarily graced our vision? How could something so ethereal and otherworldly inhabit the confines of this earthly realm? And perhaps the most perplexing of all, why did it choose to hide from me while my friend bore witness to its ethereal form for a prolonged duration? In the aftermath of that haunting encounter, I found myself endlessly pondering the nature of the inexplicable. The tendrils of uncertainty coiled around in my thoughts, weaving a tapestry of speculation and conjecture. Was it a figment of my imagination, fueled by the dim lighting and the overactive imagination of a young mind? Or did I stumble upon a rare glimpse into a hidden realm, intersecting momentarily with our own? Over the years, this unforgettable incident has remained etched in my memory, a constant source of fascination and bewilderment. This enigmatic nature has left me with an indelible mark on my perception of the world, reminding me that the boundaries of reality are far more fluid than we dare to comprehend. While the questions may never find concrete answers, the encounter serves as a testament to the vastness of the unknown, urging me to embrace the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of our understanding. In retrospect, that evening in the mansion stands as a poignant reminder of the transient and enigmatic nature of life itself. It serves as a testament to the unfathomable depths that lie beyond the surface of our existence, beckoning us to explore, question, and dare to venture into the realms that elude explanation. And so, I continue to muse upon that eerie encounter, forever marked by the image of a faceless specter peering from the shadows, an enigma that defies the confines of time and reason. Pervy Paranormal Pal. About 6 years ago, I was dating my wife, and she had 3 children from a previous relationship. They lived in a crappy little trailer that wasn't suitable for them, so I decided to get them a new home. I found an old farmhouse that was built in the early 20s, and it had been remodeled in the 70s. It was a quaint little place, not the warmest in the winter or the coolest in the summer, but it was miles better than their previous trailer. After about 2 weeks of living there, my wife told me not to pinch her while she was cutting vegetables. I was shocked because I was a solid 5 feet away from her at the time. As time went on, she started to tell me how she constantly felt something pinching her butt whenever she was in the kitchen. I thought she was just losing her marbles, especially because she didn't have a job at the time and was spending most of her time indoors. Eventually, my wife got a job at a school, and one Friday I was home alone and deciding to prep some veggies for my meal prep. Not even a minute in, I felt an absolutely furious grab on my butt cheek. It wasn't a little pinch, but a total grab and lift of my full cheek. It was exhilarating, but at the same time it was terrifying. For 3 years, every time I was cooking, I would feel this mysterious booty grab. Nothing ever really happened. Nothing unexplainable anyway. Just this strange, wild phenomenon that seemingly was confined to the kitchen. A few months ago, we moved out of the farmhouse and into a new home. Even though the new house is great, I have to admit that I kind of miss my quote-unquote friend and the strange booty-grabbing phenomenon. Maybe it was just some kind of weird ghostly presence that had attached itself to the kitchen. Who knows? All I know is that I'll never forget those 3 years of cooking with a cheek-grabbing ghost. Care home ghosts. But let me tell you, this particular incident truly solidified my belief in the existence of the other side. It was an ordinary day at the care facility where I worked, when a resident sadly passed away. We followed the usual protocol, gently washing and redressing the departed soul, and then laying them to rest, awaiting the arrival of the coroner and the subsequent transport to the funeral home. As I attended the needs of the resident in the neighboring room, attending to their care and ensuring their comfort, an eerie sound caught my attention. The sound of water running. Not just a gentle trickle, it was a loud, rushing noise that echoed through the hallway. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I followed the source of the sound, which led me to a room of the deceased resident. To my astonishment, the windows in the room were covered in a thick layer of condensation, as if someone had been breathing heavily against them. It was a chilling day, and there was no reasonable explanation for this peculiar phenomenon. With a sense of trepidation, I cautiously entered the bathroom attached to the room. What awaited me inside sent shivers down my spine. All the taps were turned on, gushing water relentlessly, and the shower was on full blast, creating a torrential downpour within the small enclosed space. It was a sight that defied logic and defied any rational explanation. What could this be? No one has been in that room after we prepared the resident for their final journey, yet here I stood, witnessing an inexplicable manifestation. To make matters even more unsettling, I noticed that the deceased resident's body had shifted a few inches down the bed from the position that we had carefully placed her. It was as if the unseen force had moved her, defying the laws of physics and challenging the boundaries of our understanding. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine, and an overwhelming feeling of unease enveloped me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I grappled with the undeniable reality before my eyes. The existence of the supernatural, the presence of spirits beyond our realm, this became an undeniable truth. Needless to say, this encounter left me profoundly shaken. The incident shattered my skepticism and replaced it with an unwavering belief in the existence of the other side. From that day forward, I couldn't help but wonder about the mysteries that lie beyond our mortal existence, the enigmatic forces that may roam among us. As I reflect on that chilling experience, I'm reminded of the fragility of our understanding of the vastness of the unknown. It serves as a constant reminder that there are phenomena in this world that defy explanation, inviting us to question and explore and embrace the mysteries that surround us. So, my friends, I share this story with you, not merely as a tale of the supernatural, but as a testament to the power of first-hand experiences and the profound impact that they can have on our beliefs and perceptions. May it serve as a reminder that sometimes, in the face of inexplicable events, the line between the physical and the metaphysical blurs, and we are left to contemplate the existence of a realm beyond our own. I think I met Giuseppe Tartini. Remember the time when I and my friends went on vacation to Slovenia, a small country east of Italy and south of Austria? It was back in 2019, and we decided to visit the beautiful town of Piran, which is located near the Slovenian coast. One of the highlights of the town is the Tartini Central Square, which features a statue of Giuseppe Tartini. We planned to walk around the square, buy some souvenirs, and maybe try some local cuisine. However, things took a strange turn that evening. My friends and I were standing near the statue of Giuseppe Tartini, listening to rumors that it moves. Suddenly, a man appeared before us, and he looked exactly like the statue of Tartini. He started to talk about random facts about Giuseppe and his compositions and the pieces that he created. I was amazed by the man's knowledge, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. How did he know so much about Tartini? We didn't speak to anyone else that evening, and the man kept talking to us. It was such a bizarre experience. He even told us about a dream that Tartini had once had. I was getting more and more curious, so I decided to ask him who he was. His reply chilled me to the bone. He said, "I am known, but unknown." And without another word, he disappeared into the night. After the encounter, my friends and I were left feeling spooked. It was such a creepy experience, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that the man might have been Tartini's ghost or something. The fact that he looked exactly like the statue was just too much to ignore. I tried to research if anyone else had experienced something similar, but I didn't find anything of the sort. The encounter still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. In conclusion, Slovenia is a beautiful country with many mysterious places and stories. The encounter with the man who looked like Tartini has stayed with me since that day, and I still wonder who he was and how he knew so much about him. Maybe someday I'll find out the truth behind the mysterious encounter in Piran. The figure with teeth in the dark. So let me take you to time about 6 years ago. I was just 12 years old, and I was fresh from school and ready to unwind. I had my lunch and plopped myself down in front of the television engrossed in my favorite cartoon. Back when TV was still a thing. My parents were out and my grandma was taking a nap in her room. Now, as I sat there, something caught my attention in peripheral vision. At first I tried to ignore it, completely absorbed in my show, but then I felt a strange movement in the room. I turned my gaze and my eyes locked onto the teeth of a person. It was a shocking sight, a black figure with a wide, eerie smile. The figure appeared to be a woman, and I was taken back. I couldn't move, frozen in place by fear. I kept staring at this mysterious woman for what felt like an eternity. But in reality, it was only about 5 seconds, and then she started moving towards me. That's when I reached my breaking point. I shouted, "Fuck this shit," jumped to my feet, raced toward the figure, slammed the door shut, and bolted into our backyard. My mind was in disarray. I couldn't gather myself, couldn't catch my breath. I continuously glanced back at the house, checking every door and window, terrified that something might be following me. It took me a good 10 minutes to finally calm down, no cap. Only then did I gather the courage to go back inside. To my relief, the door was still closed, a reassuring sign that whatever is happening was contained. I mustered up the nerve to check on my grandma, who appeared to be peacefully sleeping. Although I wanted to wake her up and tell her about the horrifying encounter, I found myself unable to do so. I can't explain why, but I simply sat in front of the TV, staring blankly at my favorite show, desperately trying to brush off the fear and hoping that it was all just a terrible nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. After a while, my parents returned home, and their presence brought with me a sense of security. I immediately called up to my friend and spilled out the entire story, recounting every chilling detail. Strangely enough, I eventually forgot about the incident. I can't explain how or why it happened, but I never mentioned it to my parents until just a month ago. It was a horror movie that triggered and buried my memory within me. Suddenly the image of that figure with its menacing teeth resurfaced, and I decided to confide in my parents. However, they refused to believe me. Can you blame them? After all, I'd kept this secret for 6 long years, and they concluded that it must have been a mere dream. But my friends, bless their heart, remembered it vividly. They confirmed that what I experienced was undeniably real, so it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. Still, I never encountered anything like it again, except for a strange night that occurred just last week. And now, here I am, sharing this tale with you, hoping to shed light on the inexplicable encounter and maybe find some answers. I found out I'm not the only one who saw a lady in my dad's house. I come from a family of strong Catholics, but my dad's side of the family isn't very religious. Despite this, Most of his family members have experienced strange occurrences in this house. We all believe that it could be the spirits of my grandparents who both died in the home and had their ashes spread in the garden on a rose bush. Personally, I've always experienced odd or creepy things since I was young. Some of these experiences are inexplicable, while others I attribute to something else entirely. When I was younger, I used to sleep on my cousin's bedroom floor. The room faces a long hallway that leads to the stairs. On occasion, I would wake up in the middle of the night and see what I thought was a short lady in a long dress holding a tray. She would simply walk down the stairs, and that was it. I've always loved horror and ghost shows, so I assumed that it was just my brain regurgitating information I had heard on TV. Recently, my cousin and I decided to do a bit of Googling and discovered that a whole block of houses my dad's place was on used to be a factory or something similar. We didn't think much of it until the topic of ghosts came up during a conversation with my cousin and her boyfriend. As a joke, I mentioned that I used to see a lady walk down our stairs, and my cousin's reaction caught me off guard. She stood up, her eyes widened, and she started saying that she had always saw the same thing, and even swore that one time she saw the lady at the bottom of the stairs. I was surprised, but also felt a sense of relief that I wasn't the only one who had seen this woman. It was an interesting thing to hear the story that my cousin had also witnessed the same thing, and it made me wonder if anyone else in the family had experienced something similar. Despite the strange occurrences in the house, I'm not afraid of ghosts or anything. I've come to accept that these things exist, and I'm open to the idea that there may be more to the world than what we can see or explain. My only ghost experience was a ghost cat. As a child, I lived in a house that was owned by an older couple who were hoarders and had a bunch of cats. I recall the house being cluttered and messy, with trash piling up 4 feet high in some areas. Eventually, the couple was evicted, and when the new owners came to clean the house, they found the remains of many dead cats. Even after my family moved out, the next owners discovered cat skeletons underneath the house. Ew. During our time in that house, we had one pet cat, a big fluffy gray and white Maine Coon. I remember frequently seeing cats out of the corners of my eye, or hearing meows that didn't quite sound like my cat. But I was always convincing myself that my mind was just playing tricks on me like usual. One day I was sitting in her office at the computer, working on something or other, and we had an L-shaped desk with a drawer on the right side. And as I was sitting there relaxing, I saw what I thought was my cat walking under the desk by my feet. I greeted the cat, saying hi to it, but then I did the one biggest double take of my entire life because this was not my cat. The cat was different, skinny and short-haired, white and translucent. I could see the black background of the desk through it. When the cat looked up at me, it meowed and then walked through the wooden drawer on the right side of the desk. The cat just walked through the drawer, like a ghost on TV phasing through a wall. It was completely dumbfounded and sat there for a minute, trying to process what I had just seen. Eventually, I got up and went to find my actual cat, who wasn't in the room. I never saw that ghost cat again, but I did feel like there were many ghosts in that house. While we lived there, I often had a sense of their presence around me. However, I never felt any negative energy or malicious intent. I think the cats that had lived in the house before probably just wanted a friend, and I was always happy to have them around. In fact, when we moved a few years later, I felt a twinge of sadness to leave that house behind. Even with all of its quirks and ghostly visitors, it was a place that had been my home, and I would always have fond memories of it. I feel like ghosts are following me in Japan. As a child, I've always been aware of the presence of ghosts around me, but my recent experiences in Japan have left me feeling creeped out. It's been about 10 days since my friend and I started our travels, and I've encountered ghosts on multiple occasions during our trip. However, the events of last night truly shook me to the core. As I was trying to fall asleep, the air conditioning unit in our hotel room began to make strange noises. Despite the loud sounds, my mom, who was sleeping next to me, didn't stir or react in any way. I was terrified and struggled to drift off to sleep. The next morning we boarded a train and I attempted to sleep during that journey, but something strange happened. I felt as though someone was blocking my breath. I couldn't wake up from my slumber. To make matters worse, my mom told me that she saw me untie my hair while I slept. But I always tie my hair before going to bed. Additionally, my brother informed me that I had been making strange noises in my sleep, which was not typical of me, as I usually sleep soundly beside my mom during our travels. I can't help but think that there's something following me, and these occurrences are too coincidental to ignore. Perhaps there's a ghost or a malevolent spirit that's attached itself to me during my travels. The thought of being followed by a ghost or spirit is unnerving, and I'm not sure how to shake off this feeling of unease. Have any of you experienced something similar while traveling? I'd love to hear your thoughts or advice on how to deal with this situation. Anyone else relate to ghost sightings with interdimensional beings rather than the deceased? Having delved into numerous accounts of near-death experiences, NDEs, I've come across fascinating tales where individuals find themselves detached from their physical form, seemingly emanating from the back of their head and ascending toward the ceiling. These individuals often describe their essence as nothing more than a pair of eyes, unable to perceive their own hands or feet. Amongst these intriguing narratives, one NDE account stood out to me. It involved a woman who encountered peculiar black blobs during her near-death journey. These enigmatic entities acted as if they were bullies, informing her that she possessed the power to manipulate objects with her thoughts alone. Strangely enough, the appearances of these black blobs bore resemblance to the hallucinations often depicted by individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia. Notably, such hallucinations are known to evolve and transform over time. Curiously, black blobs or clouds are not solely limited to NDEs, but are frequently observed during paranormal encounters within homes or even wooded areas. Furthermore, they emit an unmistakable scent of smoke and sulfur. It's interesting to note the parallel between these manifestations and phenomena associated with alien encounters or poltergeist activities. In fact, they share striking similarities with descriptions of interdimensional beings. This correlation leads me to ponder a thought-provoking question. Could these black blobs, devoid of physical bodies, actually be interdimensional beings? Perhaps when they do acquire a corporeal form, they transform into extraterrestrial entities. Could this transformation be a result of their involvement in numerous instances in breeding abductions? These musings invite introspection and open a gateway to speculation. While I am merely presenting these observations and hypotheses, I would be intrigued to hear your thoughts on this matter. It's a captivating realm where the boundaries between the physical and the metaphysical become blurred, urging us to explore the mysteries that lie beyond our conventional understanding. Ghosts Down Under. My ghost tour of Pentridge Prison, Coburg, Victoria, Australia. Firstly, brief history of Pentridge. Opened in 1851 after Old Melbourne Jail got overcrowded, housed many of Victoria's worst criminals over its time, including serial killers, gangsters, and was home to 11 executions, including the last in Australian history, and countless other deaths, all buried in a mass grave near the H Division. Only the aforementioned H Division is standing as it was when the prison closed in 1997. First time I, a 23-year-old male, went was the most macabre second date ever, both superstitious after both having previous experiences with the paranormal. The first thing I noticed when I entered the building was it felt odd. It felt alive with energy despite there being nothing in it. Those who believe in ghosts probably know what I'm talking about. Anyway, the tour continued as normal and the guide was telling great stories of what prison life used to be like. Then the guide asked for a volunteer to stand in a cell by themselves for a while. My date, a 24-year-old female, put her hand up and was shut into the cell. This cell was 9 feet by 6 feet by 9 feet, with about a 3-inch thick heavy metal door. This cell had a pentagram on the floor, but only for effect as there were no recorded Satanists or associated rituals in the prison at any time. Whilst my date was there, the rest of the group moved to another part of the prison. Still had line of sight into the cell that my date was in, though. About 2 minutes after, my date came barging out of the cell saying, "Nope, nope, 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 nope," and was clearly frazzled. She said that she was standing in there saying a rosary prayer as she was Catholic. She said that she immediately felt as though she was not alone and was being drawn into the back right-hand corner of the cell. She started to struggle to breathe, although she managed to focus on taking deep breaths and the feeling subsided. But then she felt a warm breath on the back of her neck, which promptly made her leave. The cell belonged to an American-born serial killer, Eddie Leonsky, aka the Brownout Strangler, who murdered 3 women in Albert Park during his deployment to help the Australian war efforts in 1942. Here's where things get interesting. Leonsky was known for getting drunk and singing in a high-pitched womanly voice at pubs at night, which made him a bit of an attraction for fellow pub-goers, and many started singing along with him. All 3 women that he murdered were one of those people who sang along with him. Leonsky confessed to liking those women's voices as they were vaudeville performers or professional vocalists, so as they were taking their dying breath, he would physically suck their breath out of their mouths with the hopes of gaining their vocal skills. My date was a trained opera singer. I personally didn't have anything super noteworthy happen aside from getting a super heavy feeling in my stomach and chest when I was in the cell of the former Surrey Road gang leader, Mark Chopper Reed. My date also had a similar feeling in the adjacent cell, and the night was capped off by a jump scare from a mannequin that was placed right in the doorway of a closed cell that the tour guide said to look in, as well as a plaque with information about the history of the prison, where there was a guide also well aware of the mannequin and was laughing when the group had a mini heart attack after opening the cell door. The second visit was about 6 months later, with my now long-term girlfriend, 23 years old. This time, the prison felt different. It felt obscenely heavy. Felt like we weren't wanted in there, and at this point my girlfriend grabbed my hand, looked at me, and took an exasperated breath. The tour started, and my girlfriend promptly took me to the back of the group so that way she could lean on the wall, as she said her knees started to get the shakes. We were standing there for roughly 5 minutes, and she whispered in my ear that she needed to step outside. So I excused myself from the group and took her outside and sat down. She then explained to me that she was starting to black out and felt like that she was completely drained of all energy. And she visually looked pale, which takes a lot considering that she's from Zimbabwe. I prayed for her protection. We're both Christian, and I convinced her to go back, as it was an expensive tour, and we had only really been there for 5 minutes of the 90-minute tour. She apprehensively agreed but clung to my arm the whole night, to the point that I started to lose circulation in my arm. I did stand by myself in a few cells, and it seemed random what cells had chest-crushing heaviness or not. In fact, I think the main foyer area was heavier than the previous hot spots, as I felt nothing in Eddie Leonsky's cell. Apparently he doesn't react to men in his cell. Coward in life, coward in death, I guess. And Chopper's cell felt like a friendly respite. Makes sense as he was known for his humor and charisma. Even the cell reserved for death row inmates was quiet. I did take a photo, which does have an unexplained shadow that was unfortunately lost when I changed phones. Convenient, I know. I want to make this very clear, though. I fully believe in keeping an open mind and not jumping to conclusions when it comes to the unknown, such as ghosts. I am fully open to constructive criticism, and I can't say for certain that what I experienced was actually paranormal, despite me believing that it might be. All I want is respect on both sides of the argument, as I've experienced skeptics calling believers psychos and other toxic comments purely based on their belief in the paranormal. Keep it civil, and raise each other up with healthy discussion rather than cutting each other down, eh? Has anyone else experienced water pouring from thin air? When I was in my late teens, I experienced something truly bizarre that still leaves me questioning what I saw. As a notorious night owl, it wasn't unusual for me to be up and about in the early morning. One particular night, though, my parents were out of town, and I'd returned home around 2 a.m. after hanging out with my teenage friends. I decided to grab a drink from the kitchen before heading to bed. As I was walking out of the kitchen, I heard a peculiar sound, the sound of water pouring into water. It was distinctive, and I followed the sound of the dog's dish. There I saw something that will haunt me forever. An apparent 12-inch stream of water was pouring down from thin air and landing in the dog's water bowl. I could see the ripples as the water made contact with the surface of the bowl. It was an inexplicable phenomenon, leaving me feeling spooked and perplexed. At the same time, it was late, and I was tired, so I decided to ignore it, thinking that maybe I had accidentally bumped into the bowl and my imagination was the rest. I never mentioned this occurrence to anyone, and with time, I almost forgot about it. Fast forward 10 years later, and I was attending a small family gathering where we were all swapping stories about peculiar things that they had experienced. When it was my father's turn to share, I was left stunned. He described seeing the exact same thing I was experiencing happening in our house, the stream of water pouring down from thin air into the dog's bowl, and he had seen it late at night. It was both comforting and alarming to know that someone else had seen what I saw, but at the same time it raised more questions than answers. I couldn't help but wonder if anyone else had experienced anything similar. The thought of it still sends shivers down my spine. I still don't know what I saw years ago, and I'm at a loss for answers. About a year ago, my wife and I were invited over to my grandmother's apartment. She was developing mobility issues, and she needed our help. That night was particularly challenging as my grandmother was quite stubborn, and it was close to midnight. Both my wife and I were exhausted, but we didn't want to leave her alone. We helped her to the bathroom and then moved her to her bed. That's when something strange happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something black and quick and small dart across the room. At first, I thought it was one of my cats, but when I went in the direction to where it went, there was nothing there. My wife noticed how annoyed I became when I first saw it, but I chalked it up to being tired and I didn't say anything. The next day, we were back at my grandmother's place again, helping her out around the same time. As we were moving her to her room, I saw my wife look toward my legs, and then she had a confused expression on her face. After my grandmother went to bed, I asked my wife what had happened, and at first she said nothing. But when I mentioned what I saw yesterday, she said she saw the same thing. She thought it was one of our cats, but she couldn't find it. She saw it dart across from my legs to the bathroom. I have no idea what it was, and neither does she. At first, I was hesitant to say ghost or anything like that because I'm an atheist, and I've always tried to see the rational side of everything. But I got nothing. Our cats were upstairs. There were no mice or rats, and there were no medical issues on our end that could have caused us to see something like that. Despite my rational nature, I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was going on. I started to wonder if there was something in my grandmother's apartment that we could not see. Maybe there was a ghost or some other entity that was playing tricks. I didn't want to scare my wife or my grandmother, so I kept these thoughts to myself. Over the next few days, we continued to help my grandmother out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started to pay closer attention to my surroundings, looking for any signs of movement or anything out of the ordinary. Yet there was nothing. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, I started to forget about what had even happened. Life got busy and I didn't have time to dwell. But every now and then, when I was alone, I would think back to that night and wonder what it was that we saw. Looking back on it now, I still have no idea what it was. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe there's something else going on there. Either way, it was a strange experience that I'll never forget. It was the day of my speech presentation. As a quadriplegic, I've had a brush with death a few times since my accident. But I'm still here, and I'm grateful for every day that I have. Recently, I gave a speech about my experience to my classmates. It was a difficult and emotional topic, but I felt it was important to share my story. After I finished, it was my classmate's turn to speak. He began talking about a friend of his who had died by suicide. It was a heavy topic, and I could feel the weight of the room. But then something strange happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a white figure standing next to him. At first, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Was it just a trick of the light? But as I looked closer, I could see it more clearly. The figure was translucent, almost like a ghost. It was standing right next to my classmate, and I could see the outline of its shape. I couldn't make out any features, but I could tell that it was a person, and then in an instant, it vanished. I was stunned. Did I really just see that? I looked around the room to see if anyone else had noticed, but no one seemed to see anything. I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had just happened. But then my classmate looked right at me. It was almost as if he had seen the figure too. We didn't say anything to each other, but I could tell that he knew something had happened. To this day, I still wonder what that figure was. Was it a ghost, a hallucination, or was it something else entirely? I like to think that it was my classmate's friend, reaching out to him far beyond the grave. Maybe he was just trying to tell him that everything was going to be okay. Whatever it was, though, it's a moment I'll never forget. What's going on? Help! I live in a house surrounded by woods, and to be honest, I think it's haunted. At times, I thought I was hallucinating things, but my boyfriend confirms that he's seen and heard the same stuff too. My dog always growls and gets spooked by walls and closets and hallways, and things get thrown around the room for no apparent reason. Strangely, a child's voice can be heard in the house, but there are no children around here. Even weirder, there's a patch of woods about 100 feet from my house that's giving us the creeps. One night my boyfriend went outside with our dog and came back terrified, saying that he heard what sounded like a human voice making gurgling pig noises from the woods. We decided to walk to the gas station at 1 a.m. the other night, and as soon as we approached the woods, around 50 or 70 birds started chirping loudly. Morning birds, mind you. But when we got closer to the woods, they stopped chirping all at once, and it gave us the heebie-jeebies. At night, we often hear children laughing in the patch of woods, but it's not just us. Even our neighbors have heard it too. We tried to record it once, but the laughter stopped the moment we took out our phones. And let's not forget about the screeching and yelling sounds, which we think might be an owl or a fox, but we're not completely sure. What's even more unsettling is that I feel like whatever's haunting our home is following me. A few years ago, I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when suddenly my bed started shaking violently, as if someone was trying to wake me up. I searched online and found out that some people think it's a spirit trying to get your attention. No, thank you. When I was 10 years old, I was trying to fall asleep when I felt someone sit on the edge of my bed. I hid under the covers and peeked out hesitantly, but no one was there. I didn't have any pets back then, so I couldn't have been them. I feel like I maybe have this ability that I can sense bad energy, and I can vibe things really well. I always know when I'm being watched, and I get these symptoms almost every time something bad is about to happen. Lately, I've been feeling the energy shift, and I'm convinced that I'm being watched all the time. I'm always on edge, and it's getting exhausting. Weird experiences. Any advice? I've been having some really strange experiences in my home lately, and I'm not quite sure what to make of them. I've lived in Idaho for about 5 years now, and up until a couple months ago, never had any weird happenings to speak of. For a little bit of background, I live with my parents and 3 younger siblings in a pretty typical suburban home. I've always had a bit of a messed up sleep schedule, so I often find myself staying up at night. I usually spend my evenings playing The Sims on my laptop while I was in bed, and I've gotten into the habit of leaving my window cracked open just a little bit to let in a cool breeze. My window is directly to my right next to my bed, so it's pretty easy for me to hear what's going on outside. About 2 months ago, I experienced the first of several strange occurrences. I was laying in bed playing on my laptop when I heard a sudden piercing shriek come from outside. My blood ran cold and I froze, unable to move for several seconds. Finally, I managed to shake myself out of it and rationalize that it was probably just my husky chasing some raccoons or foxes, and we have a lot of those in our area. Yet, as I lay there, I began to feel more and more anxious. I got up and went downstairs to check on stuff, thinking that maybe seeing the dog and the rest of the house would maybe calm me down. When I got downstairs, I saw my dog just staring at the doggy door we had for him. He was completely still and silent, which was really unusual for him. As I approached, he started growling low in his throat, his eyes fixed on the door. This really freaked me out, but I tried to tell myself that it was just a dog being weird, and it was 4 a.m., and I knew my mom would be up in an hour or so, which helped me feel a little bit more at ease. But as I lay in bed trying to fall back asleep, I couldn't help but feel curious about what I'd heard outside. I know it was a stupid idea, but I was dying to look outside and see if there was anything out there. Eventually, I couldn't resist the urge any longer. I got up and walked to the back door, turning on the backyard light before opening a door a crack. The light wasn't very bright, but it was enough for me to see that there was something underneath my siblings' trampoline. It looked like a person, hunched over and sitting there. I called out, thinking that it might be one of my sister's friends who was trying to sneak into or out of her room. Yet, no response for a few seconds, and then I heard crying coming from underneath the trampoline. At that point, I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to do. I closed the door and locked every door in the house, including the doggy door, before sitting on the couch and facing the door until my mom came downstairs. When she finally came down, I told her everything that had happened, and she went outside to take a look. She came back in and told me that there was no one out there, and that it was probably just one of my sister's friends who had gotten scared off. I tried to accept what she was saying and let it go, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really off. Fast forward 2 weeks and I started hearing loud knocking on my window. Whenever it happens, fear just paralyzes me, and I immediately pretend to be asleep or go to sleep in my mom's room. I heard the knocking. Fear just paralyzes me. It's like my body's frozen and I can't move. The knocking starts abruptly, and it's always loud, like someone is pounding on the glass with all their might. I try my best to ignore it, but it just becomes harder and harder. I've been losing sleep and my anxiety levels have been through the roof. One day I decided to talk to my siblings about it, and they had all had their own stories to share too. My brother, who lives in a separate building in the backyard, had heard loud banging on his door at night, and my sister claimed that she had seen a shadowy figure lurking around her backyard. I was surprised that they had experienced similar things, but at the same time, it made me feel better that I wasn't alone. I started researching online to see if there was any explanation for what was happening. I read about paranormal activity and ghost sightings, but I wasn't sure if I believed in that kind of stuff at all. I also looked up stories of burglaries and break-ins in the area, but nothing matched the strange occurrence in our home. One evening, the knocking was particularly loud. I mustered the courage to look out my window. I slowly got out of bed and crept toward the window. My heart was pounding, and my palms were sweaty. As I got closer, I could feel the chill in the air, and I shuddered involuntarily. When I reached the window, I took a deep breath and slowly pulled back the curtain. What I saw made me gasp in horror. There, standing just outside my window, was a figure dressed in all black with a hood covering their face. I couldn't see their features, but I could feel their eyes on me, watching me. I stumbled back in shock and my heart felt like it was about to explode. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen in fear and I felt like I was going to pass out. I eventually gathered my wits and ran to my parents' room, waking them up in a panic. My parents immediately called the police, but when they arrived, there was no one there. The police searched the backyard and the surrounding area, but they found zip. They told us to call them if anything else had happened, so they left. That experience left me shaken and scared. I couldn't sleep for days, and every time I heard a noise, my heart would skip a beat. I didn't know who or what was behind the strange occurrences in our home, but I did know that I never wanted to see that figure outside my window again. I still don't have any answers, and the fear of the unknown still haunts me to this day. An experience I had in 2016. Finally ready to let go. In 2016, I and a few friends decided to go four-wheeling adventuring in Freetown, Massachusetts. We were all aware of this place being a hot zone for paranormal activity, ranging from haunting, sightings, and UFOs and Bigfoot and other mysterious things. However, being the adventurous bunch that we were determined to explore the area and see if we could catch a glimpse of anything unusual. As we were heading back to the trailhead, my Jeep was in the middle of our group of vehicles, and all of them were well lit with light bars. Suddenly, all of us started experiencing electronical issues simultaneously. The lights on my vehicle, the one in front of me, and the one behind me started flickering. All before we knew it, all three vehicles had died. While we were trying to figure out what in the heck was going on, my friend who was behind me claimed to have seen a tall black mass in his rear-view mirror, just as the electrical problems occurred. He was so freaked out that he refused to tell us what he saw, but I could confirm that I also saw something eerie once we managed to get our vehicles started back up and left the area as quickly as possible. The strange thing about this black mass was that it felt like pure evil in its most condensed form. It seemed to be chasing us for over a mile through the woods, and all three of us experienced strange headaches and unexplained scratches on our bodies for days afterwards. I am unequivocally convinced that this entity was not of this world, and that it had malicious intentions towards us. Even now, years later, I shudder at the thought of that night, and I try not to think about it too much. It was an experience that left me feeling haunted and unsure of what lies beyond our world. I hope never to encounter anything like that ever again.